I want to do a quick after action report overview and first impressions of Dawn of Battle from Guts to Gunpowder 3,000 Years of Combat by Mike Nagel. This is a game published by this particular edition, published by Hollandspiel. Comes in a big 2-inch, probably 2-inch, 2.5-inch box, and is filled to the brim with content. It is a tactical battle game that, as the subtitle or heading here would show you, goes all the way from the Bronze Age all the way up to sort of the start of the Gunpowder era. And like Commands and Colors, it has a variable scale. It is based on a game from Victory Point Games called Ancients Battles Deluxe, and that in turn was also, I believe, based on a game from the 80s from 3W called Barbarian. Mike Nagel has taken both of those systems and kind of iterated on them, I think. I haven't played the other two. My friend actually owns Barbarian and Barbarian 2, I believe. And he's iterated on them for this Dawn of Battle. Now, you'll remember that Dawn of Battle, this current edition, used to be with Worthington Publishing. I believe they did a Kickstarter for it in 2020 or somewhere around then. But Hollandspiel now has the rights, and this is considered the, on the cover of the box says Designer Signature Edition by Mike Nagel. So this is the most recent, maybe the definitive version, depending on how you like Hollandspiel's production methods. I actually think it's a pretty good, well-produced Hollandspiel game. So as you can see here, I have just finished with playing against my opponent at the Battle of Zama. Romans versus Carthaginians, and here is sort of the aftermath of where we have left things. It was a Roman decisive victory. They had 2 victory points to the Carthaginians 0. The game is very stingy on the victory points, so it feels very tense and close. And there's a lot of really great design elements to this game as a tactical battle game that I think are awesome. It borrows from other systems and does its own thing in certain ways, and just feels also overall very good. This is also going to be a game that's very soloable, and I'll explain that in a moment. Red here is Roman, blue here is Carthaginian. The Roman center really wrecking the Carthaginian center. And then the Carthaginian left flank broke through and did a cavalry charge with this Carthaginian heavy cavalry against the Roman camp and baggage area, but was unable to destroy it. And unfortunately, the time ran out on the game as we reach the end. So Roman victory, but very fun learning and playing this. Now, what's most noticeable about this game, first of all, the counters are all generic military units. So heavy infantry, as you see here, medium infantry. This battle also had some mixed missiles, so like peltists and slingers. We had some heavy cavalry. What else did we have? Do we have anything else? Here's a leader. So this here's some light infantry. We also had some other ranged units potentially. But what's great about the system is that any battle can be covered because all of the units are just generic units. So here you can see some light archers when needed, some mounted archers, pikemen, light infantry, medium infantry, heavy infantry, all different types of leaders. These are phalanx units, so think Greek wars in ancient Greece, heavy archers. We've got all sorts of things. Cataphracts, I forget what the KT are. Light cav. These are, I forget all the cavalry abbreviations. I forget because I haven't played any of those. We got chariots. We got big chariots, camels, elephants. We did have some elephants here with Carthage, but they were both eliminated. We've also got gunners. So you've got gunner units as well as cannons and whatnot. The game really goes right up through sort of the beginning of the Renaissance and covers so many years of history. So for that reason, it's a very versatile game system because all of the units you need to play the game in any era are here reflected. Now, in some senses, you might think that's a real negative because it will feel very generic. I've only played it once, so I can't comment on that, but I do think that the game system does really help replayability, and all of the differences between the unit types is actually very important given the scenarios you're playing, on top of the special rules that scenarios will have. And I think actually this game does a really good job of being generic, but also feeling period appropriate when needed, because I definitely felt like we were slugging it out on an ancient battlefield in northern Africa here today. So the counters are different sizes. You've got these, the light units, light small units here in sort of a traditional square. You've got sort of a larger rectangle for your infantry formations. And then some of the cavalry units are a bit longer. It looks really nice on the table. You can spot different unit sizes and shapes. You can spot at a glance kind of what units you've got. The iconography is really clear. The next thing you'll notice about the game system is that there are no dice. It is a card-based system, similar to Combat Commander, actually. It reminds me a lot of Combat Commander in the sense that cards are multi-purpose. Cards in your hand, you can be played for the events, and these are very powerful. When you resolve melee combat, each player flips a card and looks at their modified, all the modifiers between the units. So if we had this heavy infantry fighting against this light cavalry here, we would look at, are they flanking? Is there any terrain? You know, what's the size? So this is a 4 and this is a 3, so the slightly larger you get a modifier. And then like Men of Iron or Great Battles of History or any other game that has sort of a system of weapon matrix, you cross-reference the unit type with the type you're attacking, and you get another modifier. So you can really emphasize the differences between units and how the way they interact with each other. And I really like this because this is really the engine that makes different scenarios and different eras feel period appropriate. You know, if you're charging, let's say, heavy infantry into, let's see, do we have gunners on here? Looking for gunners. Cannons. No, that's cannons. Yeah, here, gunners, right? So, you know, gunners are fairly weak against sort of like big formations of heavily armored people. So yeah, it's a really neat system. It really lends the tactics of the time into advantages and disadvantages in battle. And then based on the modifiers you get, each side flips a card and looks at what they've got. So if you're +3, it's reciprocal, kind of like Wing Leader. So if you're a +3 modifier, the other person is -3. So you just flip the card and look. So if you're +3, your opponent has to make a morale test with a +1 modifier. And if they succeed, they're disrupted. And if they fail, they're a big D, which if they're not disrupted, they become disrupted. Or if they're already disrupted, they're eliminated. Meanwhile, the other player who's at -3, they make their opponent do a morale check, and in this case, if the morale check is passed, no effect. If it's not passed, there's a disruption. So there's a lot of varying scaling of like the way this chart happens on different cards. Some cards are better than others. So it kind of simulates a die roll without needing dice, which is kind of cool. Everything is just a card flip. The number of command action points you get every turn. So the game is based off of a action point system, and these action points allow you to take orders each turn. So you're always going to get a base value based on your total leadership, which is the yellow number in the center of all your leaders, plus a draw at the beginning of the turn for some bonus ones. So you always have a variable amount. Kind of reminds me of Horse and Musket in that way. And then you'll spend these AP during the turn for a number of different things. You can spend these to draw cards, and in fact, that's the only way to draw cards to your hand for the event. So you're kind of maybe going fishing for something that'll help you. You can spend these to activate single units to move or rally or whatever. You can spend them to do what's called a formation activation, where you activate your leader, and your leader has a command range, and he can have every unit within that command range take a specific action. So moving, rallying, firing if they're ranged units and whatnot. And better leaders will have a higher command range and probably a better command rating, because the value of all of your leaders' command rating is not only your hand size for events, but it's also your morale for all of your units. So when you do a morale check and you pull a card, you're looking to roll a die, right? You're looking to get that number or less. So this, for example, would be a failed morale check. So the cards have so many different things that they do on them. Some of them have random events at the end of every turn. You're going to flip a card and see if there's a random event. This one, it causes you to reshuffle the discard pile on the draw deck. This one causes a potential end of game. The end of the game is variable based on how many turns you're going, maximum of 10. Our game ended on turn 7 because we drew this event, and then you have to make a roll against this number here. So if we drew a 3 or less, the game would be over. I drew a 3 or less on the final turn of the game, or on that turn, and it turned out that the game was over. So there's a lot of unpredictability through every element, every sequence, every phase in the sequence of play. There's a lot of unpredictability, and that's what makes the game so good to play solo, because you never know what's going to happen. You're playing solo and you're making this attack. You're just going to flip a card from each deck and just do what it says. There's no the hidden information is all the outcome of results. So you're never sort of having to hide anything. The only thing that's hidden would be what event cards you have in your hand, but I think that's pretty easy to play around if you're playing solo. These action points are also versatile. They can be spent for die roll modifiers in melee combat. They can be spent to claim the initiative. Initiative is a big deal. That represents who goes first and who places their leaders first. So all in all, there's just a lot here working together in a very concentrated way that feels really great. There's a fog of war over everything, as there should be in a tactical situation, and you're responding as best as you can to find the advantage and push. Whether it's you have better leadership than the opponent, you have more actions available to you to do things on your turn, or maybe you have a hand of cards that might enable you to do some stuff. So I really like that. Victory is based on victory points. One of the main ways that victory points happens is your army panic. So like Great Battles of History or Men of Iron, once you hit your panic level, you might get a random event that causes the game to end if you're at your panic level, or your army moves in an unpredictable manner because they're fleeing the battlefield. And then it's based on victory points. So everything you do is based on victory points. If you get the enemy army to panic, you get a victory point. If you can claim their camp tile, which most scenarios have a camp, if you can successfully destroy that, you get a victory point. You can get victory points for spending you wager per turn. You can remove an action marker from your pool. There's only 7 from the game and put it on the turn track. And then at the end of the game, based on this value here, you might score an extra victory point based on a die roll at the end of the game. So there's some really clever stuff going on here that makes the game feel tense and unpredictable throughout. And I think personally, it's a great system. We were both very engaged and had a lot of fun playing with it. It's it's got that feel of narrative generation that like Combat Commander does, but it plays out a lot like Men of Iron or Commands and Colors even does. So you're not talking about a long game. You're not talking about a particularly complex game. And once we were getting into it turn after turn, we were just like moving through the turns really quickly because you get a sense of like sort of what you're supposed to be doing. On top of that, and I think the biggest reason that you would consider this over maybe one of those other systems, if you're looking for something lighter, is the number of scenarios. So here's the core game scenario book. We've got scenarios all the way from the Bronze Age through the Roman era, Greek, ancient Greece. Here we've got Rome versus Carthage. There's a couple of those. We've got Raphia, Lake Trasimene, Marathon, Megiddo, all the way up to, let's see, what's the most modern scenario? I think some Crusade stuff or War of the Roses stuff. Here's Pharsalus and the Roman Civil War. Here's the Battle of Hastings, if you want to get into the medieval era. Dyrrhachium, Fornum St. Genevieve. This would be English Civil War, it looks like. So there's just a ton. Crecy. Here's the Kalka River is the France versus or Bouvines is the France Holy Roman Empire. Kalka River is the Mongols versus the Russians. You can see a lot more cavalry in this scenario. So yeah, that's the core game. There's like a bunch of scenarios in there. And then there are expansions available from Hollenspiel that are just scenario books, just add more scenarios. Here we've got stuff from the Bronze Age all the way through Leuctra. That's Sparta. We've got Thapsus, that's Roman. Ad Decimum, Eastern Roman. Manzikert, one of my favorites. First Crusades here. Falkirk, almost in 1300. And then here's Scenario Pack 2. This comes with another bunch of scenarios. We've got Crusade scenarios. We've got, Indus, it looks like some, let's see, Kutnahora is between the Holy Roman Empire and the Taborites. So some lesser known stuff in here is cool. The Khwarezmians versus the Crusaders. Seljuks versus Crusaders, that's the Battle of Haran. Here's Byzantium versus Rome and Kibelai. And here's Scenario Book 3. So these are all sold separately. Kadesh, you're talking about early, deep Bronze Age there. Beneventum. So basically, there's something for anyone. If you want to game a specific time period, you can find battles for it. I was really impressed with this. I can't wait to play this again. And the variation and like you could play this. I could set up the Battle of Zama again, and it would play out completely differently. A, because I know the rules more and sort of the general sense of how combat goes. You can't really attack without disrupting your own unit, so you've really got to form on echelon. Attack on echelon and make your formations have some support. You don't want to get flanked, and that really means position of your leaders is key because unlike other games, leaders aren't necessarily units. The beginning of every turn, you pull them off the map, and then you place them on the map where you want them. So it plays a little bit like Rebel Fury in that way because your leaders, they can move if they're attached to a unit, but where you place them, you're kind of locked in for the turn, and that command range is so important. And if they're with a unit, they can provide a combat bonus. You don't want to lose them in combat. There's a chance they die. There's just a lot of really smart design decisions here that make the fog of war of a tactical situation really shine through. A lot of the times I feel like Great Battles of History, and even to a greater extent Men of Iron, can feel somewhat deterministic in that you're just rolling a lot of dice and there's not a lot of decisions to be made. Here, there's decisions to be made, but more importantly, the outcome of those decisions is obscured until you get to sort of the resolution. And so you're constantly reacting to a changing dynamic game state, which for me is something I really, really appreciate in game design. So anyways, I just want to give you this quick overview of Dawn of Battle from Hollenspiel. I think this is fantastic, a huge surprise, and I can't wait to play it again. I think that the card system is genius and just provides so much variability in terms of the outcome of what can happen, and the spread of battles is remarkable. So yeah, hope you enjoyed.